Imagine a moment on a rain-soaked London morning when something extraordinary unfolded at Wellington Barracks. Donald Trump, a man known for his unshakable confidence, found himself standing before a royal guard in complete silence. The contrast was striking. Here was someone accustomed to commanding attention, now quietly observing another's unwavering discipline. But when that guard chose to break centuries of protocol and speak just 8 simple words, everything changed. What happened next left Trump visibly shaken, his eyes welling with tears in a moment of vulnerability rarely seen from such a public figure. What were those 8 words that could move someone so powerfully? The answer lies in an encounter that began on a Tuesday morning when an unexpected visitor arrived at the historic barracks. If stories like this captivate you, be sure to like the video and subscribe for more powerful moments from history you've never heard before. At 8:30 that Tuesday morning, Trump's motorcade slipped through the gates of Wellington Barracks under a persistent drizzle with no press or crowds in sight. The usual circus of cameras and reporters that followed him everywhere was nowhere to be seen. Something about this visit was different from the moment the armored vehicle came to a complete stop in the rain-soaked courtyard. The door opened and Trump stepped out alone. His security detail remained by the vehicles, maintaining their professional distance, but something in their posture suggested they understood. This moment required space. The president wore his signature dark suit, but the usual confident stride that characterized his public appearances had given way to something more measured, more thoughtful. His shoulders carried a weight that seemed heavier than the London mist settling over the ancient military grounds. The contrast struck anyone who might have witnessed it. This was not the Trump of packed arenas where thousands cheered his every word. Wellington Barracks stood in stark opposition to those bright, bustling environments. The gray stone walls rose before him, weathered by centuries of British military tradition, their surfaces darkened by the persistent rain. No red carpets led his way, no podium awaited his remarks. No audience hung on his every gesture. He walked slowly across the wet cobblestones, each step echoing off the surrounding buildings. The sound seemed amplified in the unusual quiet, broken only by the steady rhythm of raindrops against stone and the distant rumble of London traffic beyond the barracks walls. His usual entourage of advisors, assistants, and handlers was completely absent, leaving him to navigate this moment entirely on his own terms. Thunder rolled across the London sky as Trump approached the main barracks building. The weather seemed to mirror something brewing within him, an internal storm that had brought him to this place of honor and duty, far from the political battles and media scrutiny that defined his daily existence. His pace slowed further as he took in the imposing architecture that had housed British soldiers for generations. He had arrived alone, seeking something beyond politics, something that the usual rallies and interviews could not provide. The relentless pace of political life had been building toward something that required more than another campaign stop to resolve. His security team watched from their positions, understanding without being told that their role here was simply to observe and protect while maintaining distance. Trump paused before the main entrance to the barracks, his hand resting briefly on the cold stone wall. The ancient military grounds represented something he rarely encountered in his world of constant motion and noise. Here was permanence, tradition, and a dedication to service that transcended individual ambition. The contrast with his usual environment could not have been more complete. The rain continued to fall, creating an intimate atmosphere around this unexpected scene. No photographers captured the moment, no social media posts documented his presence, and no commentary analyzed his every expression. For perhaps the first time in years, Trump found himself in a space where his celebrity status mattered less than the human struggle that had brought him to this threshold. This was not a campaign stop or a diplomatic photo opportunity. Wellington Barracks had called to something deeper within him, a need for genuine connection with values and principles that existed independent of politics and personal gain. The search had brought him here to this rain-soaked courtyard where British military tradition stood as a testament to duty, honor, and sacrifice. As he stood before those imposing walls, Trump seemed to be preparing for an encounter he could not have anticipated or planned. The stage was set for a meeting that would challenge every assumption about strength, vulnerability, and the capacity for human connection in the most unlikely circumstances. The rain showed no signs of stopping, and neither did whatever internal journey had brought him to this moment of quiet reckoning. Ahead of him, the barracks stretched out in perfect symmetry, its windows reflecting the gray morning sky. Somewhere within that fortress of tradition stood those who had dedicated their lives to something greater than themselves. 20 yards from the main entrance stood a royal guard, his scarlet uniform a brilliant splash of color against the gray stone walls of Wellington Barracks. At 26, he possessed the kind of military bearing that came not from years of ceremonial duty alone, but from something deeper, something earned through personal loss and unwavering commitment to honor. His bearskin hat sat perfectly aligned, his white belt crossed his chest with mathematical precision, and his rifle remained positioned at the exact angle prescribed by centuries of British military tradition. The persistent drizzle had been falling for over an hour, creating tiny beads of water that rolled down his red tunic without disturbing his impeccable presentation. He stood as motionless as the bronze statues that decorated the barracks grounds. His breathing controlled and measured, his gaze fixed straight ahead with the discipline that had become second nature after 8 years of service to the crown. Behind that stoic expression, however, lived a man carrying weight that had nothing to do with ceremonial duties or military protocol. The guard bore the memory of his American father, Sergeant Robert Mitchell, who had served alongside British forces during deployment overseas. The elder Mitchell had returned home to Birmingham, Alabama, where he spent his final years battling illness with the same determination he had once applied to military service. Most importantly, he had taught his son that the greatest strength came not from never falling, but from choosing to stand up again when the world expected you to stay down. Robert Mitchell had believed deeply in second chances, in the capacity for redemption that lived within every person regardless of their public persona or past mistakes. He had seen it in fellow soldiers who made errors and found their way back to honor. He had witnessed it in patients who faced their mortality with grace and courage. Those lessons about recognizing the humanity in everyone had shaped his son's understanding of duty and service. As Trump's figure emerged from the morning mist walking slowly across the wet cobblestones, the guard felt something shift inside his chest. Recognition hit him immediately, not just of the man approaching, but of the internal conflict that recognition triggered. His father had spent countless hours during his final months listening to speeches and interviews, searching for voices that spoke to his belief in human potential, even when that potential seemed buried under public controversy and political division. The guard's military training warred against emotions that threatened to compromise his professional composure. Years of discipline had taught him to compartmentalize personal feelings to maintain the perfect stillness that tourists photographed and dignitaries respected. But standing here watching Trump approach with an expression that seemed stripped of its usual confidence, the guard found himself remembering his father's words about recognizing the sacred worth in everyone. The internal storm building within him intensified as Trump drew closer. Military protocol demanded silence, demanded that he remain a living statue representing British tradition and unwavering duty. But something about this moment felt different from the thousands of other encounters he had experienced with visiting officials and foreign dignitaries. His father's voice echoed in his memory, speaking about opportunities to honor truth and human connection, even when those opportunities came disguised as protocol violations. The guard's grip on his rifle remained steady, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as competing loyalties battled within him. The Queen's Guard represented more than ceremonial tradition. It embodied values that transcended national boundaries or political differences. That shared heritage of sacrifice and dedication to something greater than individual ambition created connections that his father had helped him understand during their long conversations about service and duty. The rain continued to fall, creating an intimate atmosphere around this unexpected encounter. The guard stood as the threshold guardian, holding within himself lessons about second chances and human dignity that would soon compel him to make a choice. His father's belief in redemption had prepared him for this moment, though neither he nor the approaching figure understood yet how profoundly their worlds were about to intersect. Trump continued his measured approach across the ancient cobblestones, drawing ever closer to where destiny waited in the form of a young man trained in discipline but guided by something deeper than protocol. Trump came to a stop at a respectful distance from the royal guard, close enough to observe the perfect discipline that radiated from every inch of the young man's bearing. Raindrops clung to the scarlet uniform like tiny diamonds, each one catching what little light filtered through the heavy London clouds. The bearskin hat remained perfectly positioned despite the moisture, and Trump found himself studying the precision of every detail, from the gleaming brass buttons to the spotless white belt that crossed the guard's chest. For the first time in years, Trump experienced something unusual in his interactions with another person. Instead of commanding the space with his presence or filling the silence with commentary, he found himself genuinely observing someone else's strength. The realization struck him with unexpected force. When had he last encountered such unwavering commitment to duty without any apparent need for recognition or applause? The guard's discipline existed independent of any audience larger than the single man now standing before him in the rain. Trump realized he had never truly appreciated silence like this before. The guard's unwavering gaze, fixed straight ahead, triggered something deep within his consciousness. Here stood a young man who had mastered the art of meaningful quiet, who understood that true power sometimes came from absolute stillness rather than constant motion. The contrast with Trump's usual environment could not have been more stark. His world revolved around noise, movement, and the endless demand to project confidence and authority. Yet this guard possessed a different kind of authority, one that required no words, no gestures, and no acknowledgement from others. Minutes passed in complete silence, broken only by the steady rhythm of rain against stone and the distant sounds of London awakening to another gray morning. Trump made no effort to speak or move forward. Something about the guard's presence demanded respect for the moment itself rather than any attempt to control or direct it. The president had spent decades filling uncomfortable silences with conversation, turning every pause into an opportunity to assert his perspective or advance his agenda. But here, in this rain-soaked courtyard, such tactics felt not only inappropriate, but impossible. The weight of centuries-old tradition pressed down around them both. Wellington Barracks stood as a testament to service that felt more real than any stage Trump had ever commanded. He found himself confronting his own relationship with service and sacrifice, concepts that had become abstract in his world of political maneuvering and business deals. The guard embodied these principles in flesh and blood, standing as a living reminder of commitments that transcended personal ambition or public recognition. The rain continued to fall, creating an intimate bubble around these two men from vastly different worlds. No cameras captured this scene, no reporters analyzed the significance of the encounter, and no advisors whispered strategies in Trump's ear. The absence of his usual support system forced him into a rare moment of genuine introspection. What did it mean to serve something greater than oneself? How did someone find the strength to stand perfectly still while the world moved frantically around them? The guard's breathing remained controlled and measured, his chest rising and falling in barely perceptible rhythm that spoke to years of training and discipline. Trump observed this too, noting how the young man had achieved something he himself had rarely experienced: complete presence in a single moment, without the distraction of future plans or past grievances. The guard existed entirely in the now, maintaining his post with dedication that required no external motivation or reward. His usual need to fill every moment with words or action gave way to something foreign yet strangely comfortable. Respectful observation replaced the compulsion to dominate or direct the encounter. Trump found himself learning from the guard's example, discovering that strength could manifest as stillness, and that true authority sometimes required saying nothing at all. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. Something was building in the space between these two men, a tension that neither fully comprehended, but both could feel gathering like the storm clouds overhead. The guard's internal battle reached its breaking point as he watched Trump standing there in quiet contemplation. Something shifted in his chest as recognition struck him with devastating clarity. Behind Trump's eyes, he glimpsed the same searching expression his father had worn during those final months when pain medication could barely touch the fire spreading through his lungs. The similarity hit him like a physical blow, threatening to crack the perfect composure he had maintained through 8 years of ceremonial duty. The weight of military tradition pressed down on his shoulders, heavier than the rain soaking through the London morning. Royal Guards maintained absolute silence while on duty, a cornerstone of their ceremonial role that had stood for over 300 years without exception. Breaking that silence meant violating everything he had sworn to uphold when he first donned the scarlet uniform. The discipline was rarely broken, reserved only for the most exceptional circumstances, and never for personal reasons that had nothing to do with protecting the crown or maintaining security. But standing there watching Trump's unguarded vulnerability, the guard felt his father's presence as strongly as if Sergeant Robert Mitchell stood beside him in that rain-soaked courtyard. The dying man's words echoed through his memory, speaking about opportunities to honor truth and human connection, even when those opportunities came disguised as protocol violations. His father had believed that sometimes the greatest service came not from following rules, but from recognizing moments when compassion mattered more than procedure. The internal struggle raged within him as competing loyalties tore at his resolve. Military protocol demanded that he remain a living statue representing British tradition and unwavering duty to something greater than individual feelings. But his father's memory called for something different, a recognition that the man standing before him carried his own burden of pain and loss that transcended political positions or public personas. The guard's breathing remained controlled, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as the moment of decision approached. Trump seemed to sense the shift in energy around them, though he could not have understood what was building within the young guard's conscience. The president remained perfectly still, his own internal struggle playing out across features that rarely showed such unguarded emotion in public settings. Something about the guard's presence had stripped away the layers of protection that Trump typically wore like armor, leaving him exposed to whatever was about to unfold in this ancient military ground. The silence stretched between them, heavy with anticipation and the weight of unspoken truths that both men carried. The guard's grip on his rifle remained steady, but every other part of him prepared for the unthinkable act of breaking the sacred silence that defined his role as protector of British military tradition. His father's voice grew stronger in his memory, speaking about courage that came not from never showing weakness, but from choosing to act when human connection mattered more than personal safety. Then, in a whisper that barely rose above the falling rain, the guard's resolve finally cracked completely. "My father believed everyone deserves second chances, sir." 8 simple words spoken with the quiet authority of someone who had learned their truth through watching a good man face death with hope intact. The effect on Trump was immediate and devastating. His confident mask crumbled as if those words had struck him with physical force. His eyes widened in shock, then filled with moisture that had nothing to do with the London rain falling around them. His voice cracked. For a moment, Trump looked as invisible tears mingled with the rain on his cheeks. For perhaps the first time in decades, someone had spoken to him, not as a president or celebrity or political figure, but as a human being carrying the same capacity for pain and redemption that lived within everyone. The breach of protocol became something far greater than a simple rule violation. It transformed into an act of love, honoring his father's memory by sharing wisdom that had sustained Sergeant Robert Mitchell through his darkest hours. The guard had chosen to risk everything he had worked for in service to a deeper truth about human connection and the power of second chances to heal wounds that politics and power could never touch. What had begun as a protocol break became a breakthrough, opening both men to a connection neither had expected. But there was more the guard needed to say. Mitchell's voice trembled as he continued speaking, his words barely audible above the steady rain falling around them. "There was one heartfelt commencement speech in particular, sir, that my father played every single day during his treatments. A speech Trump gave in 2016 about fallen soldiers and redemption that became his daily prayer, his source of strength, when the pain got so bad he could barely speak." Sergeant Robert Mitchell had discovered the speech during one of his sleepless nights in the Birmingham Veterans Hospital, where chemotherapy treatments left him weak but determined to find meaning in his suffering. He kept a small cassette player beside his hospital bed, and each night he would rewind the tape to hear those words again about how setbacks don't define a person but reveal their true character. The message struck him with the force of revelation, becoming his personal anthem for facing the impossible battle ahead. The dying soldier would close his eyes during treatment sessions, letting Trump's words wash over him like medicine for his spirit. He had memorized the line that gave him the most strength: setbacks reveal true character, not destroy it. And he would whisper those words to himself when the pain threatened to overwhelm his resolve. That single phrase became his companion through the darkest hours, when hope seemed as distant as recovery itself. Mitchell explained how his father had written dozens of letters he never intended to send, filling page after page with gratitude for words that helped him face death with dignity intact. Sergeant Mitchell believed that everyone carries something sacred inside them worth fighting for, and those letters expressed his conviction that Trump's message had touched that sacred part of his soul. He wrote about how political differences meant nothing when someone spoke truth about the human capacity to overcome seemingly impossible odds. The letters contained more than gratitude; they held testimony to the power of authentic human connection to transcend political boundaries and personal differences. Sergeant Mitchell described finding strength in Trump's conviction that fallen soldiers represented the best of human courage, and that their sacrifice called others to rise above their own struggles. Those words gave meaning to his own battle, transforming his cancer fight into something noble rather than simply tragic. Trump's hands trembled as he realized his words had crossed oceans to heal a stranger's soul. The president had delivered thousands of speeches to millions of people, but he had never imagined that his words could travel across an ocean to provide comfort to a dying warrior in a Birmingham hospital room. The knowledge hit him harder than any applause or standing ovation he had ever received, because it came without political calculation or strategic purpose. Mitchell's voice grew steadier as he shared his father's deepest conviction that the message conquering death had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with the human spirit's capacity to find meaning in suffering. Sergeant Mitchell had faced his mortality with grace because someone had spoken to his belief that setbacks reveal character rather than destroy it. The speech became his companion through the final 18 months until cancer finally claimed his body. The guard revealed how his father had made him promise to remember that second chances existed for everyone regardless of their mistakes or failures. Those words from Trump's speech had become part of Sergeant Mitchell's legacy to his son, a belief system that survived even when the cancer took everything else. The dying soldier had found in an American politician's speech the spiritual strength that sustained him through his final battle. Trump's understanding of his own influence shifted completely as Mitchell shared these details about his father's relationship with those words about fallen soldiers and redemption. The president realized that his greatest power lay not in commanding audiences or winning elections, but in speaking truths that could heal wounded souls searching for meaning in their darkest moments. What began as a speech about military sacrifice had become medicine for a dying man's soul, proving that authentic words possess the power to touch hearts in ways their speakers never anticipate. Standing there in the London rain, Trump learned that his greatest legacy might not be found in history books, but in the private moments when his words provided comfort to people facing their own battles with dignity and hope intact. The revelation left both men forever changed by an encounter that neither could have anticipated when the morning began. Trump extended his hand toward the guard and their hands met, silent protocol forgotten, as two strangers became brothers in shared vulnerability. This was not the calculated gesture of a politician working a crowd or sealing a business deal. His fingers trembled slightly as they moved through the rain-soaked air, carrying the weight of genuine emotion rather than strategic purpose. Mitchell accepted the gesture, understanding that some moments transcended the rules that typically governed his existence as a royal guard. The rain around them seemed to hush, as if the very air recognized the sacred nature of what was unfolding between these two men from vastly different worlds. Both stood at the edge of transformation, their shared vulnerability creating a bond that reached across the vast differences in their backgrounds and circumstances. Mitchell felt his father's spirit moving through this encounter, recognizing that speaking those 8 words had honored Sergeant Robert Mitchell's memory in ways that silent ceremony never could have accomplished. The guard's decision to break protocol had required more courage than any military action he had faced during his 8 years of service. Speaking truth to power demanded a different kind of bravery than standing at attention for hours or maintaining perfect composure before crowds of tourists. Mitchell discovered that honoring his father's belief in second chances required him to take risks that went beyond personal safety or professional consequences. His act of love had elevated duty to its highest purpose by choosing human connection over rigid adherence to regulations. Trump's voice cracked as he spoke his first words since arriving at the barracks. Second chances. I needed to hear that. The president found himself acknowledging Mitchell's sacrifice and his father's courage in ways that politics had never taught him to express. His greatest power lay not in commanding boardrooms or energizing rally crowds, but in recognizing the humanity and sacrifice of others. The tears in his eyes spoke to an emotional awakening that transcended any political calculation or public relations strategy. Mitchell's journey from silent guardian to truth-teller became complete as he realized that breaking protocol for love had not diminished his service, but had given it deeper meaning. His father had taught him that everyone deserves second chances, and now he had offered that gift to someone who rarely received such grace from others. The young guard understood that his years of military discipline had prepared him for this moment when doing the right thing required abandoning the safety of established procedures. Trump's transformation revealed itself in his willingness to stand exposed in ways his public life had never demanded. He had gained insight into his own capacity for authentic human connection, discovering that his words possessed power to heal rather than simply to persuade or dominate. The knowledge that his 2016 speech had provided comfort to a dying soldier transformed his understanding of leadership itself. True influence came through inspiring hope in dark places, rather than simply accumulating votes or wielding authority over others. The transformation occurring within both men happened simultaneously, as if their shared vulnerability had created perfect conditions for mutual growth and understanding. Mitchell found courage he never knew he possessed, while Trump discovered humility that his public life had rarely demanded from him. Their different worlds had collided in this rain-soaked encounter, producing something neither could have achieved alone. The guard's willingness to honor his father's memory had given Trump permission to access emotions he typically kept buried beneath layers of political armor. Both men carried forward from this encounter a deeper appreciation for service sacrifice and the power of second chances to transform even the most unlikely circumstances. Mitchell learned that speaking truth required him to risk everything he had worked for, while Trump understood that receiving truth required him to abandon the protective barriers that separated him from genuine human connection. Their mutual transformation proved that growth often came through unexpected encounters rather than planned experiences. The shared experience revealed that transformation rarely announced itself with fanfare, but emerged quietly from simple acts of recognition and respect between people willing to see past surface differences. Mitchell's 8 words had shattered barriers that politics and protocol had built between them, opening space for authentic emotional exchange that changed both their lives. Standing together in that London rain, they had discovered something profound about the human capacity for connection across any divide. The moment would stay with both men long after the rain stopped falling and the motorcade disappeared beyond the barracks gates. This encounter at Wellington Barracks proves that beneath every public persona lies a human heart capable of being moved by simple truth and genuine connection. The tears that fell from Trump's eyes that morning revealed something the cameras rarely capture: the capacity for powerful figures to be transformed by honest words spoken with courage and love. Sometimes the greatest strength comes not from never showing weakness, but from recognizing the sacred humanity we all carry within us. The titles and uniforms we wear cannot shield us from the power of authentic human connection when delivered at exactly the right moment by someone willing to risk everything for truth. If this story moved, you share it to remind someone today that compassion can break any protocol.